I loved him from like the first time I met him.
Brennan was my best friend. We did absolutely everything together. He stayed at my house. You know what I mean? He was pretty much like my boyfriend, but just a gay, fabulous man.
He had an amazing life, right? And he helped a lot of people.
It was different to see how much he had changed in that time, because it was probably only about 8 years that I hadn't seen him, and his whole personality had changed quite a lot.
I guess, I don't know, I guess people think that it's like he was bad because he died that way, and that's not the case, right?
When we go back out, we quickly distance ourselves from our friends that are well and that are sober. And, you know, it happened over a period of about 2 months. His world started to get a little bit messy, and I knew that he was using.
On like a very personal level, I know 3 people. I know my brother, and I know 2 people from the house that have passed away.
I had his ex-girlfriend, on my Facebook page, actually.
Yeah.
And she wrote to me and said, yeah, Alex is in the hospital. He OD'd tonight.
I just got a call from one of a common friend, and I just knew right away. She called me like 8 in the morning, and I just knew when I saw her number, I just knew that something really horrible had happened to Brennan.
And it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I just remember like crying. It was the first time in a long time that I cried, and yeah, they put him on life support.
And I had found out that he had passed alone in his bedroom, you know, sad and lonely and by himself.
I mean, I don't even really know how to help me a lot of times. Like, the grieving process just kind of like takes itself on its own, takes us on our own journey.
As soon as he passed, that's just kind of what I focused on, was like getting his loved ones together to celebrate and remember Brennan for the human that he really was, you know, because he was such a special, powerful human.
You know when you look at somebody and you just see that like spark come back in them, and you're like, oh, that is the person that I love right there, right? And you know, like with addiction, it takes that away from you slowly, and sometimes you don't even notice it's leaving, and then it's just like, it's almost like having a terminal illness.
We suffer, and we get so weak, you know, so every time I saw him, he was worse and worse, you know, and then his methods of poisoning himself became stronger and stronger.
I don't care if everyone's telling me it's going to kill me, because they were, and I was still buying it because I was like, wow, this is like really good. It's going to kill me, right?
You didn't know how to help them, you know? How do you help somebody? And they won't ask for help.
Because our disease is so progressive, and because I think that the guilt and shame that he faced, or whatever it was for him, was so great that he started using heavier drugs, and then he started shooting up, and I knew that that was so bad. My heart, I was very fearful when I found that he was using opiates in the way that he was using them.
At certain times I was able to, like, I was playing football in high school, and I was able to say no to weed when everyone was smoking weed.
Right.
And but then I crossed that line,
Right.
where I don't think I had a choice anymore.
Asking for help was definitely the hardest thing that I ever had to do. It was just to ask and to actually seek it out earnestly.
Mm-hmm. Even the recovery community is still suffering. Like, we are losing our brothers and sisters at such an alarming rate. And now with fentanyl, you know what I mean? It is so easy, obtainable, and so poisonous. You know, people who know how to use heroin successfully are dying because of the potency of it.
The public view of it is like, you know, you could stop if you really wanted to. This is all just like willpower, and because I've had people tell me that. They're like, you could just stop on your own.
I don't think anybody in their right mind would choose this life. You know, it's not like, oh, just get a job and clean up your act, you know. So there's so much prejudice for those that are suffering. You know, there is lack of acceptance and awareness.
I wouldn't say it's too much of a stigma. I would say there's a lot of truth to it, but there's a lot of like judgment and not being able to relate.
And it doesn't start off as causing all these huge robberies and stuff like that, you know. It just starts with like stealing from your family, because they're gonna forgive you, right? And then stealing from the places where you work and all that other stuff. Like, it just kind of like snowballs.
You know, and what goes hand in hand with addiction is mental illness, right? You know, especially of long-term use, long-term life on the streets, long-term abuse, lack of nutrition, all of those things play into it.
It actually is pretty scary to see, like, there's this huge epidemic and suddenly there's a lot of addiction funding that's like just disappeared. And there's part of me that understands, because having the disease of addiction, it's not something that you can just treat and it's all better. It's something that is really resistant to recovery.
And I noticed that not more so, but a lot here in Calgary. Like, I'm from BC, and BC, when that's where I'm from and that's where I was my sickest, and there was so many resources for us, you know, especially for youth, especially for females. We have one treatment center for ladies in the city, one, and the wait list is crazy. You know, when I decided to get help, I had many places to choose from, and I had resources and agencies willing to help me, and I find here in Calgary that is definitely lacking.
Yeah, and I think it's like absolutely ridiculous when I listen to the media and they're like, oh, we're giving $12 million to fund that, what's that drug to wake you up? What's that?
Oh, naloxone?
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't think that's, naloxone or whatever it's called. And I really, I think they're way out to lunch with what a solution is to it. And I don't know, I'd be more leaning towards like the treatment, like you want to go to treatment, okay.
All kinds of stuff that go along with the disease of addiction. And it's not something that you can just be like, yeah, okay, you have addiction and here's your pill and have a nice day. Because really, for a lot of people that have addictions, they'll take one pill the first day and then the next day they'll take 2 or 3 or 4 and then they'll be fucked up on them. So it's like, yeah, like, I just, this disease is brutal.
I think safe consumption sites are one thing that will definitely help this health crisis. You know, to be giving out clean rigs, to be educating people more, to have more community awareness around this, and to just really look at this as a disease, that these humans are not horrible people, that they're people who are just really, really sick.
It's been both good and bad for me. Like, in one way, that was a really big reminder of what happens when you stop fighting. When you stop fighting to live a healthy life and to live a happy life, is that you can get lost.
The family members that didn't know he was sick, you know, people who didn't know that he was an active addiction, to say that your son or your brother or your boyfriend or whatever has died from an overdose can be very hard and very scary, because there's lack of acceptance, right? And then that judgment comes upon those people that maybe you weren't a good enough parent, or maybe you weren't a good enough partner, or maybe, you know, and so I see that happening. And I also see the guilt that people are faced with when our brothers and sisters die of addiction, because there is always that feeling that they could have done more, they could have tried harder, they could have extended their hand more, they could, you know, they feel it's their fault a little bit.
One of the big turning points for me was like, I was like parked at a light at Kensington there by Chicken on the Way, and there was like a homeless guy came up to get change from me, and like I looked at him, and it was like the first time where I was like, I could really put myself in his shoes and be like, you know, that could be me, right? And I need to not be so judgmental
with like the homeless population or what have you, that they're dying on a daily basis. And now, and again, it's not taking away from the seriousness that there are regular people or not street involved people dying, but it's ridiculous to me is that's what it takes, right? Like humans are humans, right? We are no greater or no less just because of our hardship. So yeah, it kind of pisses me off, but here we are. People are talking now. Lips are flapping about this thing.
You know, I've done my high schooling. I'm going into power engineering, you know, and it's like, you know, the truth is the truth, and I understand why these stigmas exist, but I also understand why, you know, people can change.
You know, I remember telling one of my family members about me being an alcoholic, and she just was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I was like, okay. I don't really know how to like accept that. Like, why are you sorry? I found a way out. Like I found a lot of peace in my life, and I don't regret what happened in the past, really, because it's made me who I am today.